Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our CMO agenda, 7 ways to improve customer retention and other revenue KPIs. My name is Chris Nagel. I am with Vindicia. We are a billing, payment, and monetization platform in the subscription and recurring service space. Our agenda topics this morning, we'll do a very brief overview on the global subscription market. We'll talk about some of the key metrics that matter, and then we'll walk through 7 key ways to improve customer retention and revenue. First, just a brief comment about Vindicia. We are a monetization platform in the subscription space, as I mentioned. We've got about 150 recurring and subscription clients offering services on a global basis today. We are managing nearly 220 million end-user customer relationships on behalf of our clients. We have very much a data and best practices orientation to working with our clients. And so as a part of my presentation this morning, I will be referring to the data, the best practices, and the various approaches for accomplishing some of what I speak about. There will be the opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar. If you type, you'll see a tab on your webinar screen to be able to type a question, and I will answer those at the end of the webinar. So first and foremost, I think we're all here on the phone this morning because we all understand this global digital subscription wave. There are a tremendous number of things happening around subscription services, not just digital, but in a broad variety of businesses around the world. We see everything from dog food to print cartridges to music to TV, online services, identity management, and many, many other kinds of services being offered on a subscription or a recurring basis. It is a multiple billion-dollar market today. Depending on who you believe, it can be as high as 150 to 175 billion in subscription services around the world. In our particular business, we see massive growth in the newspaper, the television business, the online services business, and nearly everyone is thinking about subscription in some form or another, which is tremendous for the consumer and for us as providers in the market. I think this is kind of motherhood and apple pie, but I thought I would talk about some of the core benefits of subscription, and then we will get into the metrics and then the 7 steps. Obviously, subscription and recurring revenue models in general, and I will mix those 2 terms. Subscription, by our definition, is something that is a flat rate monthly service. Recurring is something where you charge the end user on a recurring basis. It could be month to month, it could be every other month, it could be for particular transactional events, but there is a recurring relationship with that end user. So obviously revenue predictability is paramount. You can grow a nice steady revenue curve with any kind of subscription business. From a consumer's perspective, depending on what it is you're selling, there is a much lower upfront commitment. If we think about some of the software services and applications that are available in the B2B market as well as in the consumer market, the lessening need to purchase large licenses and being able to spread that cost over time. Price and promotion flexibility. One of the things that we spend a lot of time with our clients talking about is subscription gives you the ability to try different pricing models, to try different promotions and campaigns in markets and not have to worry about pricing implications because you have very specific offers in those markets. And so your ability to be flexible as a marketeer becomes even that much more so when you're in the subscription and recurring market. Long-term relationships. We all love to have long-term relationships with our users, whether that is a B2B environment or a B2C environment. Establishing this recurring relationship, providing a service that end users or corporations want to use and are willing to pay for over time is core to what we're all thinking about in this market. And finally, upsell opportunity. If we have those long-term relationships, if we have a product or service that the consumer or the buyer believes in and uses on a daily basis, we have ample opportunity to sell our own products and services as well as those of our business partners to that end user or subscriber over time. So let's talk about a few key metrics that matter. And some of this might be very basic, but I thought I would start at a high level with some of the key metrics in a recurring business. And this can really be any recurring business, whether it be software or dog food or digital services of some form. Customer acquisition cost. This is the cost of acquiring that user the first time. How much What's the advertising spend? What's the acquisition cost? What do you have to pay affiliate partners? What do you have to spend to reach that end user? And depending on the product or service, that can vary quite drastically. Monthly recurring revenue, pretty basic. The idea that you as a provider or of a service or a content service provider have a recurring revenue relationship built into your business model. And as I said before, that might be subscription or that might be just purely recurring with an end user in some form over time. Average revenue per user, this is an old line telecom term, been around for quite some time. But looking at on a consistent basis, on a periodic basis, your average revenue per user, and obviously the goal here is to increase that revenue per user. Average customer lifetime. And this is core to nearly everything that we do and is one of the most important factors we believe in any subscription or recurring business is how do you maximize the average customer lifetime of the user base as a whole. You can look at individual users, you can look at cohorts, groups of users, but across the user base in its entirety, what's that average customer lifetime? Churn. Obviously, churn is directly related to customer lifetime in the sense that what is the percentage of your subscriber or user base that churns on a periodic basis? And typically that's measured on monthly, but you can pick other metrics as well depending on the financial orientation of the company as well as the marketing orientation of the company. It doesn't have to be a single number. We will talk about the idea of voluntary churn versus involuntary churn. Voluntary churn being that the subscriber or the user is no longer in need of the product or service. It could be that they don't like the product or service, or it could be their situation has just changed and they no longer require the service and they want to cancel. Involuntary churn is the idea that end users are not able to access a product or service because something has broken in the network. It could be at the application level, it could be a problem with the service itself, or more often than not, it's related to payment-oriented issues. And users unable to pay for their service, churning off of a service is one of the things you have to guard against the most in a subscription business, and we'll talk about that at length. And finally, if we combine all of these metrics, we talk about average customer lifetime value. And I'll move to the next slide to explain what I mean by ACLV. We can look at this, and it's a bit of an eye chart on the top, but if we wanted a purely mathematical definition from a great marketing text, we can look at CLV across the top of the screen here. I like to simplify it, keep it pretty basic. Average customer lifetime value, so it's the average monthly revenue minus the average monthly costs times the customer lifetime, and then obviously less any acquisition cost oriented to acquiring that subscriber in the first place. So we're looking at how much money are we making, how much money are we spending, what is the lifetime, and what is the acquisition cost. And obviously the key here is to maximize that average customer lifetime value. You can spend a tremendous amount of money acquiring a user, and if your first three variables don't work, you're never going to have a profitable business. Likewise, if your cost number is too high or your customer lifetime doesn't cover your cost or your acquisition cost, you're going to run into run into trouble with your business very, very quickly. In our case, with all of our clients, we provide business reviews, and the key metric we do look at is average customer lifetime value within their own business, within their own segment, across industry, across peers, and across business models. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a few minutes. I did want to show an example here of how customer lifetime varies across sectors. And I pulled a few examples from our customer base, and this certainly doesn't represent all of the kinds of customers that we service today. But when I talk about average customer lifetime, we're looking not only at a moment at time, but over time as well. What is the tail associated with that average customer lifetime? And I've outlined four segments here: online services, entertainment, media content, and financial online services. And you can see in the case of an online service provider, that blue bar, they've got tremendous customer lifetime value. They are renewing a very, very large number of their subscribers on an ongoing basis. That's reflective of quality of product, of the need for the product that particular provider is is offering to the market, as well as their ability to manage the back-end infrastructure, payment networks, banking relationships, payment relationships necessary to extend that customer lifetime. And so the goal here is to track to that blue line or even higher if you can do that over time. So let's get into it. What are the 7 key ways of maximizing customer retention and building revenue across a multiple different set of KPIs? And frankly, I could talk to each of these for about an hour apiece, but I will try to keep them at a fairly high level. So the first area that we believe is absolutely critical is having marketing flexibility, enabling marketing to offer products and services in the way that the user wants to buy, when they want to buy them, and how they want to pay for them. And that varies quite drastically across where that user is in their life cycle with your product or service. The methods to acquire users or to convert users using things such as marketing campaigns, marketing promotions, dynamic discounting, bundling with third parties is very different in most cases than the kinds of offers you're going to place in the retention segment. And there is a massive amount of money to be made in retention with marketing offers, save offers, promotions and the like to get users to spend more. And finally, if you're trying to expand or increase that ARPU, there are a very specific set of marketing offers that are appropriate to revenue expansion. And one of the biggest mistakes that we see folks making is trying to have a one-size-fits-all offer. And sure, it will work to get started, but it doesn't maximize the revenue possibility and the subscriber relationships and the lifetime value across that subscriber life cycle. It's great to get started, but you're leaving revenue on the table if you aren't thinking of each of these 3 areas. If I think about these 3 areas and look at things like, for example, things like geography-based offers, looking at the demographic or the socioeconomic situation of the end users that you may be targeting. The great talk, obviously, around the world about the millennial generation. There are specific offers and kinds of products and services that matter to them. And I'll actually show you at the end of this presentation a number of client examples where they have taken very different approaches to target different segments of their market and different segments of users based on where they are in their life cycle. Similarly, the second key point here is using the appropriate business model to attract more customers. And this really goes back to that marketing flexibility. And if you look at any large-scale subscription business around the world, whether that be a sports business or an online service or financial services or some of the things that Amazon is doing these days, providing the appropriate business model is very important to getting that user to purchase. And the way that a consumer or a business buys in Germany is very different than the way that they buy in California versus the way that they might buy in Singapore. Business models are different. Cultural impact in terms of evaluation of product, the use of free trials is very important and critical to getting that user to buy for the first time, but also to stay on for the long term. And we see this happen quite a bit where a particular service provider will offer a particular market offering, say a dynamic discount or a coupon, to acquire new users, but they force that user to use a payment method that they may not be interested in using or they may not have the ability to use. And yes, they've spent the money, yes, they acquire them, but their lifetime might be just 1 or 2 months. Whereas understanding that this user has a propensity to buy in a certain way based on their situation, their market demographic, and enabling the appropriate business model for them to make their purchase is critical not only to that acquisition, but to the long-term retention of the user. We see this quite often, for instance, with credit card payments versus ELV payments in Europe, for example. And being very aware of who you're going after and how they like to purchase is very important, and enabling, as I said, the appropriate business model. The third core area is leveraging the channel. And the channel can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and it means very different things to a business-to-business provider than it does to a consumer provider. All of us have channel in some form, if not at the initial launch, then over the lifetime of products and services if we want to maximize the revenue value and the revenue stream for the company. Many folks get caught in the challenge of having single-threaded processes and systems that don't allow them to do partner pricing, to do partner promotions, to provide exclusivity to channel partners, to manage affiliates, to track affiliates, to report on activity to affiliates, to understand where affiliates might be generating fraudulent activity. So being very aware and having a specific plan around channel and having the systems in place to allow you to maximize the marketing opportunity with that channel, as well as the back office risk and billing and payment associated issues with a given channel is a third core area of focus. And depending on the business model, this may or may not have greater impact, but it's certainly something that we believe everybody should consider. The fourth area, involuntary churn. We talked about voluntary churn being the idea that an end user that has no longer has a need or has an interest or frankly doesn't like the product, they are going to move on unless perhaps you can create save offers that get them to try another product or service or to give you another month at a discounted rate or perhaps free. There are all kinds of things you can do in a save scenario. What we're speaking about in number 4 is the involuntary churn. These are active users that want to continue to use their product or service, and for whatever reason, they weren't able to continue using the product or service based on payment failure in the banking network. And I can tell you that in the banking networks themselves are 40 and 50 years old. They are very fragile. They are very brittle. They are constantly changing. They are very different in different parts of the world. And we see across the 220 million users that I mentioned before that generally somewhere between 15 and 25% of all transactions fail on a monthly basis. That's a massive number. It's a massive hidden revenue number, hidden revenue loss if you don't manage it appropriately. Even worse, you've spent all of this money to acquire a user. You have a user that wants to continue your product or service, and then they aren't able to. And as soon as they aren't able to, because of some sort of error in the network or within the billing platform or other systems, they aren't able to complete their payment and therefore aren't able to use the service, will look for the next best alternative as fast as they possibly can. And I will come back to some examples on that in just a few minutes. Benchmarking. Benchmarking in marketing and benchmarking go hand in hand. Understanding what's happening, what the ideal ratios are for whatever your subscriber or lead or prospect profile might be. There are a set of metrics that are appropriate to manage in any subscription or recurring revenue business. We talk about subscription metrics, acquisition and retention. Obviously, what's the conversion rate? What's the acquisition rate? How many of those users are you retaining on a monthly basis or whatever period you choose? The expected lifetime analysis. What are you expecting to gain from the subscriber? How does that relate to what actually occurs in your business over time? The retention snapshot, and the snapshots are where, for public companies where everybody tends to get very focused on what's the churn number, what's the retention snapshot. Retention is something that happens over time and is best measured over time. So there are snapshots in time. We churned this many users this month. We gained this many users this month. But looking at the tail associated with retention is extremely valuable and something that we have invested quite a bit of R&D in helping our clients understand. Revenue metrics. We're all in this to make money. The revenue metrics themselves, we work with our clients, and we believe this is absolutely the right way to run a subscription or recurring business, to establish a set of benchmarks up front based on what we know and what we've seen around the world, and then managing those benchmarks and recording and acting on those benchmarks over time, primarily through marketing activity, as well as kind of back-end network and banking network activity. But being very aware of what your retention and lift is, what you have saved, what your success rates are. By success rates, I mean the 70 to 85% success rate that I had mentioned previously. By the way, a well-run subscription recurring business should be in that 95% range, depending on the kind of business and product and service that they're offering. That's a number to attain. We have many clients that are higher than that. Depending on the product or service, that number can be significantly lower. And that's where looking at both the reasons for active and the reason for passive churn are very, very important. Looking at things like refund and refund analysis, we spend a lot of time evaluating for subscription businesses, what is your refund policy? How do you handle a user wanting to cancel? How do you handle user dissatisfaction? And our belief is having the most liberal refund policy possible is critical to long-term success. If you're fortunate enough to be in the digital services world, the margins are extremely high. So refunding a user, allowing them to have a good experience rather than a negative experience when they either want to leave or they're dissatisfied, will increase lifetime value many times over. And we've done a tremendous number of studies on the correlation between refund policy and the lifetime value and the lifetimes in general of end user subscribers. And we can think of this as individuals and people, people ourselves. If I think about my relationship with Netflix, I have entered, I have exited, I have had some problems, I have asked for my money back, and it's always, yes, Chris, sounds good, you can leave whenever you like. Oh, you had a problem, we will refund you for that. And the next time I need that service, guess where I'm going to go? And I have many other examples like that, using refund as a marketing tool to gain success. And then we get into very specific operational metrics, things like payment methods associated with the appropriate demographic. This is what I mentioned before about the millennial or perhaps the underbanked or unbanked, and how you are enabling them to pay for a product or service, the cultural impacts of particular payment methods. In our case, we're supporting over 120 payment methods. Believe me, a majority of that is credit and debit oriented, especially in the U.S. But for certain segments, credit and debit is a non-player, and you need to rely on areas around mobile, for instance, or PayPal-like instruments, or peer-to-peer payments, depending on the segment that you're operating in. Working closely with your vendor to evaluate things like payment processing, what's happening in the payment network. So I won't dive into each of these in detail. These are things you can learn a lot more about on the Vindicia website. But these are all core payment billing metrics that most marketeers don't think about when they first think about launching and running a subscription and recurring business. And there is a lot of hidden revenue to be found in understanding these benchmarks and measuring your business appropriately over time. Number 6. This is building on top of the metrics. So in the last case, we were talking about some fairly specific, tactical, transaction-oriented metrics. The wonderful thing about the world that we live in today is we have access to a tremendous amount of data from a variety of different sources. And some of the examples I'll show you are of people that are taking advantage of that data availability from within their own network, from within their own organization, from partners such as Vindicia and others that have this broad depth of data that marketers can use to target in a way that they couldn't in the past. And frankly, much of this data is available, would nearly be unattainable on an individual organization basis. But if we look at the power of a network such as Vindicia's or any of our partners or others in the market, you can bring data together in ways that are very interesting to measure and run your business. I've mentioned a few here on this slide. Obviously, consumer behavior is every marketeer's core focus if you're in the consumer space. Looking at things like subscriber worthiness or subscription worthiness. What kind of subscription offer, what kind of recurring offer do you present at the time that the user is interacting with the system are interesting elements. Looking at things like content or service profitability. Using a platform such as ours, such as the internal data that you have through tagging and many other marketing systems, you can get a very clear sense of what content, what product, what service is working with which segments of the market, and then take action. Whereas before, it might require days and weeks and months to take action. We have products, or we have clients that are setting up products, tearing down products on a daily basis. They will try it. They will see if it works. If it works, they'll roll it out to another market. They can make slight tweaks. They can A/B test all day long to really understand using the sorts of data available. And the last comment here is the socioeconomic data, and this is one that we're particularly excited about. We can glean a lot of information, not only from the purchase behavior of a particular group of users or subscribers, but classes of groups or users or subscribers. In our particular instance, in the digital space, we're able to very much understand what groups of users, based on prior behavior of this particular group of users in the past, might result in better outcomes from a subscription purchase or a transactional purchase of a particular product or digital offering in the market. And so it's one of the areas that I'm personally most excited about, is incorporating socioeconomic data with the demographic data with the usage data in a way that, frankly, just wasn't possible 5 years ago. And last but not least, support for global growth. The great thing about subscription services is that you can be a global overnight sensation as fast as you want to be. You can do it overnight, I guess I should say. There are very specific payment-oriented applications or considerations to be made around being a global provider. As I mentioned before, we've got these 220 million user relationships. We're active in 150 countries around the world today. And the subscription and recurring purchases that individuals and businesses make in these markets varies quite drastically. I've spent a lot of time on payment methods already. Currencies are obviously a core component of what's happening in the world today. And do you charge in USD? Do you charge in local currency? How do conversions work? How do you price? It's often one of the mistakes that we see quite often is people just take a price point and just convert it, as opposed to thinking of the marketing implications associated with currency conversion and pricing of individual products and plans. And languages. This one is one that I think, it seems to make obvious sense, but we see, given the nascency of the subscription market, of organizations moving into areas they haven't worked in before, language and language dialects are very important in retention. And we will often see 2 to 3% retention lifts based purely on the language of communication. And so this would be the final group of the 7, and we've obviously covered a lot of ground very, very quickly. And so I do want to get into some examples associated with customers or clients that are doing this extremely well in the market. Oh, and I should say, those 7 are a fantastic 7, but one of the things that we preach and that we work with folks on, and we do a lot of consulting work outside of our core business, is to iterate. Enable yourself with the platforms, with the people, most importantly, to make rapid changes. With the data that we have, with the ability to gather information very quickly. Don't be married to any idea, to any product, to any plan, to any price. Iterate as fast as you possibly can in the market. And even when it doesn't seem to be broken, break it and iterate again. Okay, so let's talk about a few of our client examples that we think are doing some very interesting things in the subscription and recurring market itself. First up is BBC Store. BBC Store is a recent announcement we made a couple of weeks ago. They have launched their product and service in the market. If you're interested, you can certainly go to the BBC site and check this out. And this is BBC taking what is the world's largest content library and finding new ways to monetize it. And so the store itself targets, obviously, series, television, historical content and videos. on a one-time transactional basis. And BBC had quite a few regulatory challenges associated with the BBC Trust in the UK in bringing this product and service to market. One of the core criteria for the BBC in selecting Vindicia was flexibility. They knew that the marketing team knew that they were going to be surprised in many different ways about what was going to work and what was not going to work. They had certain bounds inside the UK, but they had massive opportunities outside the UK for packaging and pricing and promotion. They are also offering, which they have spoken about recently and announced recently, subscription video on demand services. And there will be more and more information on that in the market, but the same kind of criteria are important to them and to the marketing staff at the BBC in terms of how do we package, how do we promote, how do we price, how do we build. Sorry about that. Hopefully everybody can hear me now. We had a bit of a presenter error there with the microphone. Moving on to the next example associated with one of our clients is the NFL. And the NFL is, for those of you, this is DirecTV NFL streaming. For those of you outside the U.S., this is NFL's first big move into streaming DirecTV around to consumers in the United States not using the satellite network. And what's interesting about the DirecTV situation is obviously they have a core subscriber base. They have 25 million plus subscribers that subscribe to DirecTV satellite service today. NFL Sunday Ticket is one of the most watched programs and offerings around the U.S. The streaming offer was somewhat controversial, but the marketing team took it upon themselves to say we need to reach a new audience. We need to expand the reach. We've got a phenomenal asset here with NFL Sunday Ticket. Let's stream that to select groups of users. If we look at their offering, they have done a great job of using seasonal offers, and you might have seen this over time if you in any way are an NFL fan, where they start out with a single price, that price decreases over time. They allow you to refer in users and friends. The program itself is something that's been has been greatly successful in the market, and is something that they are going to continue to offer in many different forms over time. Hearst Digital, another great example. Hearst Digital, this is COSMOBODY. You can log on to the website and take a look at it. Hearst's objective with COSMOBODY was to use assets that they already have in place today and reuse them, add video content, and target an entirely different generation of users to the Cosmo magazine, but also the Cosmo video services. And they are offering this on a subscription basis. They have done a great job of trying a variety of different plans, a variety of different offers to support their particular use case and marketing objectives. Presto, Foxtel Presto. So this Presto is a Netflix-like offering in Australia, offered by Foxtel. They have been in market about a year. As you can imagine, for anyone trying to compete with Netflix, it's challenging as a marketeer, to say the least. They have very much held their own in the market. It's a rapidly growing business. We have been working with them to create a number of different product offerings, a number of different plans, acquisition plans, free bundle offerings depending on what other product or service they might be purchasing from Foxtel or other partners in the network. So I would certainly encourage you to take a look at and specifically look at their pricing pages and their acquisition pages. Vimeo. Vimeo is a IAC company here in the United States. They have been on the Vindicia platform for nearly 5 years now. What I think you should take a look there is their progression of the subscriber through basic and enhanced services over time. They are also offering transactional services to the videographer who wants to sell his or her products on the Vimeo website. If you go onto their purchase pages, they walk you through what I think is an excellent progression as an end user of how to think about their product, how to think about their service, and how you as a user can progress with them over time as your needs and use cases change. NASCAR. I don't know if there are any NASCAR fans on the phone. NASCAR has had the challenge, the marketing team has had the challenge that they have signed obviously huge rights deals for the broadcast content associated with NASCAR for races and in-track video and those sorts of things. What the marketing team there developed was a set of ancillary offerings built around something they call TrackPass. And TrackPass is a product really targeted at the avid NASCAR fan. If you just want to watch races, you can do that on your TV. But if you want to log in and watch the race on your TV or stream, but get very deep, detailed information about what's happening in car, about what's happening with the driver, TrackPass is a great way to do that. And one of the things that's fun for us as a provider of this kind of subscription service for this client is to watch the massive ramp, the massive growth prior to a large race. And it's one of the considerations I didn't talk about previously with subscription and recurring services, but it's the expectation on the part of the end user of experience, of a phenomenal experience. And if they don't get that experience, they're going to be asking you for that refund that I mentioned to you before. So developing the content or the product or the service, regardless of what it might be, having that user experience is paramount. We have clients that are offering everything from dog fitness kind of tools and other kind of Internet of Things that are all built around that experience and the experience of acquiring, but also the experience of managing that, or participating in that product or service, and continuing to subscribe to that product or service is something that everybody, especially in that Internet of Things space, is thinking about. Media Prima, I thought I would highlight this one for our participants that will be listening later in Asia, but I think it's interesting for everyone in that Media Prima is a traditional media company. They have newspapers, they have magazines, they have a radio station, Tauntaun Radio, they have a streaming radio station, a broad variety of businesses that are very stovepiped. And as a traditional publisher that was really a family-run business previously, they had built these stovepipe businesses to great profitability, but in today's age felt the need to start to combine that user experience, to have a single view to the user. In our case, using our platform to create subscriptions, to create plans, to create purchase mechanisms, to get that end user further and further engaged with the Media Prima family of products. In their case, you obviously have all kinds of issues around payment methods and language and offers in the market. But it's somebody that you wouldn't typically hear about in the United States, although I think the use case is very applicable in the United States, and we are working with a couple of large publishers. But it's somebody I thought would be interesting for those of you that would like to go take a look at their website and see how they've kind of combined their subscription offers and manage those offers. And they have been in market about almost a year now. And we are already seeing retention increases based on how they are combining these products and services. So somebody that might have stayed just on the radio streaming service for a few months has now extended that by 25 to 30%. So it's a interesting example of how they are combining their products and services and how they are using a platform like Cashbox, and frankly there are a number of other different products and partners involved in that, to build a subscription and recurring business. As you can see, I am walking through quite a broad range of different kinds of clients around the world with a variety of different subscription models. And I do want to highlight that the 7 attributes that we talked about before are 7 kind of core tenets to what each of these are trying to accomplish, but every subscription business is different. Each of them has a different set of metrics. Each of them has different approaches that they need to take to the market, but they are all using the single platform and the data that we provide out of that platform to build their business. Telstra, this is another movie example. We do quite a bit in the movie space, as you can see, but as I mentioned before, we have examples in everything from dog collars to dog food to hard goods to enterprise software with organizations like Intuit and others. So we've got a broad range of people that are offering subscription services on the platform. In this case, what you're looking at is a large Australian telecom carrier, Telstra, that wireless carrier, that, like many carriers around the world, is struggling with how do they add value to their business, how do they build interesting engagement around subscription and recurring businesses as their core telecom business shifts and changes over time. And so they've got a product called Great Pond Movies, or Premier Movies in this particular website example, where they are cross-marketing the movies and the content that they've licensed, offering these services direct to their consumer, in some cases marketed through the Telstra name on the Telstra billing plan, and in other cases as a direct relationship to the end consumer, having nothing to do with their current plan or marketing approach to the captive customer that they have today. And as you can see, I have talked about a large number of customer examples. I hope you have learned something from each of those 7 core tenets to building and retaining customers over time and maximizing retention. We have a great opportunity to work with marketing organizations and finance organizations around the world as they launch and as they optimize subscription businesses. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity. We work with startups that are just getting started with great ideas and to some of the largest organizations in the world. We would be happy to share more information, to dive into more depth on some of the data elements that I spoke about previously, and understand your business situation and help you evaluate how to maximize your subscription business. So with that, it does not appear that we have any questions from the audience. So you can see my contact information there, Chris Nagel, knagel@vindicia.com. You can see our Twitter, our website. Please come take a look at Vindicia, and thank you again for joining us this morning. I do apologize for the brief audio blip there in the middle of the session. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.